Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to review the importance of energy audits and available government incentives. Our first thing we'd like to do is thank our title sponsor, the complete group of companies that has made today possible. So thank you very much. Next slide. My name is Gail McKee, and I'm one of the moderators for today, alongside Emmanuel. If Emmanuel just wants to say hello. We're both
Good afternoon, everyone.
Canada member, and he is the co-founder of the complete group of companies. And we are also joined by Fan Fong, who is the Director of Energy Management from Complete Energy Solutions. You want to say hello, Fan?
Hello, hi everyone.
And also with us today, we have Robert Edwards from the Independent Electricity System Operator, who is the business advisor and for the private sector.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And at this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Robert to tell us a little bit more about incentives.
Terrific. Thanks for the introduction and allowing me to join you folks today. We're going to go with this, share. People can see that? Yeah, terrific. As mentioned, I'm with the Independent Electricity System Operator, and we are, I'll tell you a little bit about what we do, and we're going to talk about the new framework that's in place in the province of Ontario, providing incentives for electricity conservation. Let's go page down. So who are we? A lot of people know the Save on Energy brand, but perhaps not as many know who the ISO is. In a nutshell, we operate Ontario's province-wide electricity system. We create electricity market efficiencies. We do planning, really big into supporting innovation, as you'll hear a little bit about, and leading forward in these new times with renewables and different, the historical electricity power supply is quite different. So we're really looking at a lot of innovative means for providing energy to the sector, distributed energy resources, et cetera. We really do a lot of work with communities and stakeholdering. What I'm going to be talking to you about specifically is province-wide energy conservation programs. So we've got a history of well over 10 years of providing incentives and helping consumers with reducing their electricity consumption. We provide incentives for that. Why do we do that? It's good for two reasons. One, the more that we can help consumers use less electricity, the less we need to supply. So we have a 300% ROI for these programs. For every dollar that we invest, it's a return of $3. And that is specifically less generation required and less transmission throughout the province. Pretty good investment. The government agrees, and we're into the 21-24 framework. We've had a history of these programs, and the new program now is focused on two main things. That is peak demand reduction and really getting customers involved in saving energy and helping their businesses. So I think you're going to see a lot of messaging around that, and that's where this funding is coming from. So let's talk about that new framework. We were directed by the Ministry of Energy to implement a 4-year conservation demand management program. We're really ecstatic about that. Frankly, with COVID, we've got pretty good supply right now in the province for a couple of years, but with the Pickering retirement and refurbishment of Darlington, we're going to be looking seriously at it more power supply in 23, 24, 25 going forward. So you'll see the new framework is going to be two-year chunks, kind of business as usual, if you will, for 21, 22, and then 23, 24, you'll see a little bit of a shift. So stay tuned for that. Really, as I mentioned, bonus or focus on the grid system itself, and also with Ontario's economy and competitiveness for the consumers. So as you probably know, that Save on Energy brand is associated with us. And our stats tell us about 92% of the market knows Save on Energy, but far less ISO. So now you know who we are and where we're going. I would say the three main takeaways that I want to leave you with, and I'll close with that as well. It's a 4-year framework. We're focused on peak demand, and we're providing support for you and the channel, the trade allies, the consultants, to engage in energy efficiency and help with these incentives and these electricity saving projects. So retrofit is our largest, most popular program within the framework. And a lot of people would remember that. So it's going to be front and center, as it usually is. And what it is allows folks to create a project, submit an incentive application to receive funds for their payback on their projects. We used to have a custom stream and a prescriptive stream. The custom stream was where you would look at a project and say, this is my base case, and now if I do this energy saving case, A minus B equals C. The thing, and that's good for a lot of people, bigger organizations, larger projects, but there's a lot of administration both for you and for the Save on Energy program. So that's part of what the government looked at with our reduced budget. We looked at efficiencies for you and for us. So we're really focused on the prescriptive track of the retrofit program. And what essentially that is, you're going to look at the equipment that you need to replace. And I'll give you a list in a moment of what those measures can be. And it's essentially, I have a number of these that I need to replace. And I'm going to look in the website and the online application. It's going to show me, I get X amount per. Okay. And then you go ahead and choose those measures, submit that application. And I think you'll see it's quite streamlined. We're really looking at a more increasing these measures. So stay tuned for that. And we're really interested in feedback. So it's a quicker payment. It's an easier application process. And as I mentioned, as you're starting to use these or continuing to use these prescriptive tracks and these measures, please let us know if you have any ideas. We're really open for feedback from the marketplace. So how's the program work itself? You need to create an account as the participant, log in, find out what measures you're going to be implementing, and then apply. And then you get pre-approval from us to start your project. Or once you've applied, if you're willing to take on the risk, you can go ahead and start your project without getting approval. If it's a really large project and there's a lot of funding coming from us, you may want to wait and make sure that you've got pre-approval, but it's up to you. And we've got a lot of support available to you for Save on Energy. One of the things to note as well is that for you condo boards and owner operators, your trade ally, your vendor can start the application for you, do the paperwork as it were, even though it's online, and then you would have an account and you would approve that. So just know that we have the flexibility there in the system. These are some of the measures I told you about, and lighting is a very, very prevalent one. We've got quite a list. And as you look at the types of lighting in your facilities, you'll see that they'll match. I just threw a slide up here of typical measures, but there's a lot there. And lighting is by far the most popular measure. And it really has a big impact on your savings, tenant comfort as well, and safety, productivity, and really good for us on the grid because it's a big difference going from incandescent, halogen, fluorescent to an LED. And all of the incentives are to LED.
Hey, Robert, it's Emmanuel, if I can just chime in for a second on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess the important message to convey to everybody here is Even though many condos have done lighting retrofits 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, the advancement of lighting over the last 5 years has made it financially prudent to actually look at doing an enhancement of a lighting retrofit. There's been condominiums that actually have saved an additional 30 to 40% off their hydro consumption usage with the new type of fixtures that are available in the marketplace. So just because a condo has done a lighting retrofit, let's say 10 years ago, doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile or beneficial economically to look at doing another one.
That's a great point. Okay. HVAC measures as well, whether it's a rooftop unit situation or chillers, cooling, motors, fans, etc., ventilation. So there are incentives available for that as well. And those would be the two main areas where you'd be looking at in your facilities. I wanted to throw this slide in regarding COVID-19. It is certainly with us. And the reason I bring this up is because some of these projects require site visits from us, our technical reviewers, to come by and look at the projects and look at the base case and then the final case. And of course, we're going to be doing that following the Ontario government's public health measures and doing it safely. And if you're uncomfortable with us coming in, you let us know. But COVID-19 is very, very front and center for us, and we want to proceed carefully. Just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Retrofit support is available. I emphasized that earlier. So go to our website, saveonenergy.ca, click on the retrofit program, and there's a ton of information there, case studies, videos, webinar recordings, a ton of stuff there. And when you send an email to retrofit@iso.ca or phone the 1-844 number, you're going to come to our main area. And depending on where your facilities are in the province, we have 3 retrofit service providers: Central, the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, the south, if you will, and the north of the province, and you can form relationships with those folks specific to the properties that you're in those geographic regions. Wanted to let you know as well that, and some of you may have received this, but many of you may not have. We were going to do a retrofit webinar yesterday, and we had a lot of people sign up, over 600. And unfortunately, we experienced technical difficulties. So we've rescheduled to this Friday. And I will leave this with the CAI to get to you so you're able to join us. We welcome you to join us on Friday morning. I wanted to also talk about another option for you. And this is called the Energy Performance Program. It's all performance-based. And the idea of this one is really interesting. It's a holistic approach to savings. There's some rules with regards to minimum facility size. We don't have to get too deeply into that, but if you know the load of your facility, and then you'll be able to see if you're a good fit for it. You need to create a baseline energy model of your facility. And then what we do is you take that baseline energy model, and that represents the typical peak in consumption of that facility. And then you go and do all sorts of work in there. It can be operational, behavior, capital, but it doesn't have to be. It's a combination. And what I like to stress is a kilowatt hour is a kilowatt hour. And we're going to pay you every year based on what you save against your baseline. So year one, now when you submit that and you get approval, the intention is that you will save 5%. You're going to commit to save at least 5% of the overall consumption of that facility. So you need to go in with your eyes open, look what you're doing over the next number of years and see, yeah, this could be a real fit for us. If it's not, then you have that prescriptive track for single projects. But this is a holistic approach, and it's really quite cool if it fits for you. So the idea is you get involved, you do a bunch of work in year one, and then you submit a savings report and it says, hey, we saved this much electricity. And we say, okay, we're going to pay you 4 cents per kilowatt hour of what you saved. And if you do nothing else for the next 2 years except maintain that, we're going to continue to pay you year 2, 4 cents, and year 3, 4 cents. So it's essentially 12 cents a kilowatt hour. But there's additional savings, incremental savings that you might experience over year one. So just a couple of nuts and bolts things that are really quite interesting. It's only a 3-year agreement that we're offering. There have been programs before where it was prorated and good, but this is really, really clear. And what's interesting about this one is that it's essentially a 7-year program. As long as you get an application approved by us by the end of December 24, we will offer you a 3-year agreement. So anytime in between now and the end of 27, we'll also pay you $50 per kilowatt of peak demand reduction. That's an adder, it's not a requirement. And we're also going to sweeten the pot by providing an upfront incentive payment. So the math is, what's your consumption times 2.5%, which is half of that 5%, times 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Previously, and that's money now that you can invest for whatever work you're looking at, some capital or tenant engagement or programs or maintenance, best case situations, best practices, all of which can lead to savings. And one of the things that I'd emphasize, if you're going to go this path, it's beneficial to do as much saving as you can up front in year one, so you get to count that year over year, right? Makes sense. So one of the things that in terms of paperwork, you're committed to meet 5% by the end of year 2. If year 1 you've hit 1%, that's fine. And then year 2, another 4, then you're good. But it's a 3-year program. We've also introduced some technical requirements have been streamlined to improve customer experience. So once you start getting into this, you'll see that it's a little more straightforward for your energy model. And we're also opening it to industrial facilities. It doesn't impact you folks, but I want to emphasize that I believe the energy performance program is going to be very, very popular. And if it's a good fit for you, I really think you should look into it. So last slide for me is, okay, so now we know about the framework, 4 years. We know about the programs are focused on peak, and we know there's support out there, both from the retrofit service providers for retrofit and the ISO specifically for the energy performance program. And that's me, by the way, and the energy performance program at ISO.ca. But what can you do now in your facilities? So I'm going to just start a little bit and then hand it off, and we'll get in far more detail from Fan. But what can you do? LED, Emmanuel mentioned that earlier. So that's 10 to 20%. It can be, and that's really great for us, as I mentioned, because it brings the peak down. What's next? Chiller and heat pump tune-up, 5 to 10%. Ventilation optimization, 5 to 10%. And look at now heating, cooling, hydronic pump. That's a big one. And the booster pump optimization, 1 to 5%. And we have incentives for all of this, depending what track you go, and really particularly the energy performance program. Look what it can add up to over time, 20 to 40% electricity savings. And don't forget to think about federal government incentives, municipal government incentives. Enbridge has incentives. So I was speaking to you specifically around Ontario electricity incentives. So folks, I'm happy to pass it on now. I will stop sharing my screen. Before I do that, I'll give you one last slide. This deck will be made available in a PDF, and you're welcome to contact us at all these means. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now and pass it off.
Thank you very much, Robert. One thing that I think Fan will touch upon during his presentation as well, we were just notified today of the new Enbridge incentive that just came out. So it is time sensitive. I think the time is up until the end of June. Fan can briefly touch upon that during his presentation as well. But I see there's some great questions in the Q&A session, and hopefully we'll address those after Fan's presentation.
So I guess I'll take it from here. One of the big reasons why you want to consider doing an energy audit, I'm guessing a lot of you are budgeting for both last year and this year. And the biggest line item that you'll see on your operating fund is utilities. And to many of us, this is a big challenge. It's going to be a bigger cost than it is due to the lockdown. And many people are asking, well, what can I do about it? One of the best ways you can start is to do an audit of your biggest line item, so an energy audit. And if we can move on to the next slide, we'll take a look at some of the resistance behind why it isn't done. First and foremost, it is a challenge because there are hundreds of ways in which you can retrofit your building. But the issue here is not all of the opportunities are created equal. As a matter of fact, you do have good ones that Robert illustrated that has a payback of 3 years or less. But you may have some other out and left field technologies that may have not been proven yet, or it's hard to quantify exactly how much you'll save if you do a particular improvement to your building. You need a firm number in which to present to your board, and you can't exactly present something to them that will not guarantee some sort of return or have their numbers rooted in reality. So if we move to the next slide here, we'll see exactly why this is a bit of a daunting challenge. Good energy audit, though, should answer two key questions. First of all, how efficient is my building? And second of all, what is the low-hanging fruit and the best economic option with the lowest possible payback? Because, for example, here, if we want to take a snapshot of your building, we want to have a good idea of how your building's actually performing. I'd say it's compared to a physical that you'd have to do every year, but in this case, it's a building every 5 years. And prevention is always going to be better than getting surgery. If we can find out what the chronic problems in your building are and we can solve them in a proactive way, this is how your building health is going to improve in the long run. But that being said, there's new technology coming out. That's why if you've had an energy audit done within the last 5 years or over 5 years ago, it may be time to consider it again because there is new technology on the market that is better than what your building has currently. And if we can move to the next slide, we'll take a look at the metrics as well. First of all, you want to consider how much does it cost to heat a square foot in your building compared to other buildings that are around the same age and type. How much energy does my building really consume? And if we see here that your utility costs are high, I'd say over 30% of your annual operating fund, there are savings potential there. Another term that you may have heard about is EWRB. Quick reminder as well, it's 2021, so now you need to do your 2020 EWRB as well. But this is also a very useful tool that Robert is also very involved in. You can use what's called your energy usage intensity. It's, in other words, the energy report card for your building to see like where on the spectrum does your building lie in terms of energy efficiency. You'll have a score that's generated through your EWRB called your EUI score. And that's a good meter stick to see if there's potential in your building, especially if your energy audit hasn't been done yet and you want to consider doing one. That's one key metric you can use as well. And if we can move on to the next slide. This gives you an idea of what you're looking at when you're comparing your energy consumption from your benchmark to what the actual consumption would be. So for example, here you have two buildings. One may be your building, so that would be the blue line, and green is the benchmark for all those buildings of that particular age, of that particular building composition, same building envelope. So quick meter stick here shows that blue building here is definitely higher than average. It's spending a lot more than it should during the heating season, so January to April. And we see that even when it comes to domestic hot water consumption, when the boilers are shut off June, July, and August, it's still above that benchmark. So this gives you a quick and easy way after you've done your EWRB to see, is there any potential in my building before moving on with an energy audit? And if we look at the next slide as well, we'll get deeper into this other metric, the low-hanging fruit. So as mentioned earlier, not all energy conservation measures are made equal. Some measures may have a payback of 1 year, some may have a payback of 5 years, and then some may have a payback over 20 years. I did see someone mention in the chat, are there incentives for windows? But generally speaking, those are items that you would get done when it's time to be done. The incentive on top of getting your windows done is just the icing on the cake. And depending on how much energy your building uses, some items may not make any sense whatsoever. For example, heat recovery systems. If your building isn't properly vented in the right way, may have a payback of over 30 years. And generally speaking, if the payback exceeds the useful life of the equipment, it's not a worthwhile investment. It'll actually lose money. So this is a key to keep in mind when you're doing your energy retrofit. Always do something that is a good investment that will have a proper return. So to answer that question, you may want to ask yourself these key points here. Does it have a payback period of 3 years or less? And the upper limit's 5. In the case where it doesn't, does it achieve a significant amount, in this case, over 5% of your total energy consumption savings? And at which point you could apply this to the building performance program, which also pays you additional money on top. And if you haven't looked at an energy audit already, has your building implemented things like LED retrofits, variable frequency drives, and a building automation system? So if we look at the measures here, and this is what we call the summary page or the money page, we see that not all of your building upgrades are created equal. We can see here, for example, you've got great payback on demand controlled ventilation. So variable frequency drives, if your building is running at a constant speed, you can now adjust the operating of your building so that it runs on demand instead, achieving significant amount of savings. In this case here, a building automation was a good option as well, because we found that a lot of the equipment here was running nonstop. You've got booster pumps as well, which are typically oversized in around 90% of the buildings that we see. And you have heating, primary boilers, and domestic hot water upgrades that you only may want to consider when the boiler is past its prime, when it's past 10 years, and the estimated annual savings may compel you to upgrade that boiler earlier. On its own, if you're looking at a brand new building, it isn't worth much merit. But when you have this page here, you can create your 5-year energy plan. And this is really the key value behind the energy audit, this one page summary right here. It'll give you an idea of what to tackle first, and then your priority in allocating expenses so that you get the best return on investment right at the beginning of the project. And then when it's time to consider the others, you have at least a good idea of what you'll save if you need to replace the equipment in your building early due to a catastrophic failure or whatnot. So if we move to the next slide, this does have a significant long-term impact on your building. We're looking at a 15% reduction in energy costs here. This is both across your gas, water, and hydro. And in the case of this building, it had an operating fund just for energy around $1 million. So that's typically split around $350,000 for your electricity, $350K for your water, and then $200K for your gas. Post retrofit budget, we're able to bring it down to $850,000. And if you look at the third column here, your energy savings, this building is banking $150,000 a year. We add that up, we factor in inflation over the next 20 years, you're looking at $3.8 million of savings. But of course, this doesn't come for free. There was a project cost involved here of $610,000. But if you take that away and then you add the incentives on top to bring the total cost down to around $600,000 with tax, you're looking at over $3 million of savings here over the long term of the building. I'm pretty sure a lot of you here would have your jobs a lot easier if you had an extra $3 million in your reserve fund. Things would be a lot better for the building too. And this is what we want to look at when you're presenting this to your board. You want to be the good shepherd that brings value to your building. And this is the easiest way to bring value to your board of directors. Once they see this number here, they're obviously going to see, number one, an extra $3 million in my reserve fund is going to make my asset worth a lot more. And second of all, you're controlling costs within the building. For example, many property managers spend a lot of time making sure that no hooligans get into your building and then graffiti up your building and cause a few $1,000s worth of damage. It behooves us then why we wouldn't also consider what else is costing my building money. And in this case, wasteful operation of your equipment is taking tens of thousands of dollars of losses in your building, and you need to keep track of it. So this is one of the best ways to do so, and then rein in those costs so that they don't spiral out of control. If we look at the next slide, we're going to look at budgeting for you as well. If you're going to budget out these measures, you want to stagger them so that you get the best return up front. And then consider, as Robert mentioned as well, incentives that are available. For example, flexible financing, where you could stagger the payments over several months or over across several years of budgeting, or new programs that are available from the City of Toronto or even at the federal level, where they're going to bankroll energy efficiency projects like the Infrastructure Bank and then the Tower Renewal Program. The one catch that I would strongly advise to property managers, though, is that there is no such thing as a free lunch. So if someone offers you, for example, zero capital up front, they're going to make it on the back end somehow. And if we move to the next slide, we'll see exactly how. So you may have heard of this before, guaranteed savings, and they do come at a cost to your residents. They'll enter into a multi-year, what's called a performance savings contract, that will often sacrifice the comfort of the residents in order to meet a guaranteed savings amount. Now, the big challenge here is the company that makes this guarantee to your building has a number to meet in order for them to stay profitable and in order to satisfy their shareholders as well. And often that comes at the expense of the comfort of your residents. Now, that being said, a good retrofit should eliminate waste, but most importantly, not be noticed or cause issues with your residents. If it floods your department with complaints, it's not a good retrofit. It just makes going to work every day a terrible experience, and it will bring problems not only for you, but also for the board of directors as well. And the problem is when you sign on to one of these guarantees, you're going to be facing exit fees, or you're going to be married to them for the next few years. They may also operate your equipment below manufacturer recommended levels and cause damage to your equipment as well. And if you look closely at those contracts, they often don't cover damage to equipment, or they'll only have a deductible for it. Emergency repairs and service calls may also not be covered as well. And these add unplanned expenses and unwelcome expenses to your operating budget that you really don't want to see. And it's also excluded in the fine print. Now, moving on though, high payback items, you're looking at your building automation system first. There's a big difference between these two pieces of equipment here. First, we're going to cover a proprietary building automation system. And this basically means that if your subscription ends, you're left with a view-only workstation. It basically has the functionality of a set-top box that you get from Rogers. And for example, if you cancel your Rogers subscription or your Bell subscription, all that set-top box really does is give you the TV Guide channel and not much else. With a proprietary BAS, it works in pretty much the same way. If your subscription ends, all you can do is see your equipment and you can't make changes to it. You're locked out of that system entirely until you pony up again for a subscription fee, which is often tens of thousands of dollars a year. The other option, which we encourage all buildings to consider, is what's called a non-proprietary system, because your building retains control of the equipment even if there is no monitoring contract in place. Your building is free to choose a monitoring provider, so you're not married to one particular company. And this gives you buying power as well, because now you have the force of the market on your building side. It's just like, for example, an open market, where if you're not happy with your current monitoring provider, you can now go into the market, terminate the contract, which usually has a 60-day clause, and then find a better monitoring company for your building. That being said, though, BAS is one of the best ways to keep control of your utility costs and maximize the life of your equipment, with the caveat being if it's done right, and by right we mean non-proprietary. You want to always maintain control of your building and not be married to a particular company. And if we can move on to the next slide. Another high payback item that many of you may have already done or have inherited are VFDs, or variable frequency drives, also called variable speed drives. Many buildings built before 2012 has equipment that runs on 2012 or earlier technology, in other words, 24/7, because the electronics weren't advanced enough yet to do this. Same equipment is typically oversized as well, because an engineer has never been fired for oversizing equipment. And when examining pumps, air handling units, only around 10% of the cost of that equipment is owning it. So the capital value of that equipment is only 10% of the cost. And the other 90%, for example, is the cost of the electricity or energy required to run it. Many of you may have heard that the most expensive ownership cost of a vehicle is depreciation. Well, in the case of boilers, around 80% of the lifetime cost is fuel, and only 20% is the cost of the actual boilers and venting. When you're looking at pumps, many building owners are surprised that their booster pump, if it's really oversized, uses more electricity than all the LED lighting in their entire building. And I've seen this firsthand. the cost to replace that pump is maybe $50,000. If you look at the cost to run that pump for the next 20 years, it may be $700,000 or $800,000, which is significant compared to matching the operation speed of the building with the actual demand is where you'll have savings that have zero impact on residents. In some cases, we see equipment running at full speed, even at 3 a.m. in the morning when no one needs any hot water at all. With an old pumping system, it'll run full speed 24/7. And if you put it on a system that runs on actual building demand with variable speed drives, you'll see the actual consumption go down, but zero impact on residents because it'll throttle up when there's demand anyways. And if we look at the next slide here, LED retrofits, many of you may have done this already, but it is worth revisiting. The reason why is because the next generation of LEDs could save you an additional 30% on top of the ones that you have already. This is especially worth considering if you had a fly-by-night LED retrofit company come in and then mess up the color temperatures of your building. It is a great thing to consider as well if your buildings don't have sensors on your existing LED fixtures. The main reason for doing this is because it extends your usable lifespan. If the equipment is only running at 10% power level, there's less amperage running through it, and then there's less wear and tear on the equipment. It can last significantly longer. The prescriptive incentive as well also pays a lot more money for areas that were overlooked during your initial LED retrofit under the custom tracks. So for example, some buildings may have elected to not do their communications rooms, their electrical rooms, their mechanical rooms during the first LED retrofit because they determined that under the old model, these rooms are only on for maybe 100 hours out of the year. These particular rooms benefit from the prescriptive track because you're being paid a fixed amount, you're not being paid on savings. And in this case, you want to revisit them. So if we look at the next slide, we're at the conclusion here, so that's pretty much it. I'd like to thank you for your time and really push here. The impetus behind creating your energy management plan is the energy audit. Once you start there, you have all the tools at your disposal in order to create a 5-year energy plan. And you'll also be able to know as well, what impacts my building the most and how can I get there? So if you haven't done it already, please get an energy audit and create your long-term energy plan for your building.
Can you mute it? Thank you, Fan. I appreciate that. If there's one focus that I'd really like, one area that I'd really like to highlight here and reaffirm that Fan touched upon is the most important component of an energy audit is it allows the property managers as well as the board members to understand really what are the areas of inefficiencies within the facility itself. I can tell you from my perspective, being a board president for 11 years and literally doing hundreds of energy audits, even newer buildings are highly inefficient. Buildings that have been constructed over the last 6 or 7 years, you may think are efficient in nature. It's the exact opposite. They're highly inefficient. So there's always at least 1 or 2 or 3 different areas within a complex that we find that typically will result in a payback of less than 2 years. So again, take advantage of this opportunity. We encourage all of you folks to really understand your building on a holistic level and see where is really the low-hanging fruit, because at the end of the day, you know, we all want to keep our maintenance fees in checks and we want to enhance the value of our assets. So I stress to board members all the time, as well as property managers, think of your building as an asset manager and sometimes not as a property manager. What can we do to really enhance the overall value of the building, keep our maintenance fees in check, and also ensure comfort of our residents? That really is the driving force here. And we're happy to assist you folks in any capacity because again, we literally maintain hundreds of condos throughout the GTA and we've done well over 500 energy audits. So we have a plethora of experience and we predicate ourselves on building a symbiotic relationship at the end of the day to make the managers look good and also make sure that the boards are happy. So we hope you found value in this presentation. Feel free to engage us. We would be happy to assist you in any capacity moving forward.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Appreciate that.
Gail, you're on mute, dear.
Oh, I tried to unmute myself. Oh.
We can hear you,
Sure,
Gail.
Gail, you available?
I'm here now. Okay, good. So I just wanted to say thank you very much, Emmanuel and Fan. That was very informative and we appreciate that. At this time, we would like to move on to some of the questions that we've had throughout the presentation, and we do welcome you to continue to ask your questions while we have this good team together here to answer anything with respect to the government incentives or energy audits for your building. So the first question we have here, and I think it's probably asked a few times I saw, was can we get copies of the slide presentation by email? This presentation is recorded and will be available on the CAI Canada website following the presentation. Move on to the next question. I'm not sure who would want to take this, and I think it's kind of already been touched on, but Bob asks, are there any incentives for new windows for condos?
I'm happy to take that one on. From the electricity side, there is not any longer. It used to be through the retrofit custom stream, it could have fit. But what I can tell you is that there would be through the energy performance program. What's interesting about that is proving the savings previously, and it's predominantly cooling from our perspective, from Save on Energy and electricity side. Enbridge, you'd need to look at to see if they have anything from the heating side, and perhaps Emmanuel Fan know more about that. But I can tell you from that it is possible through EPP, and the nice part about that is you wouldn't have to go through all the measurement and verification M&V process to prove the savings as that individual measure. Now it would just be part of your holistic approach to energy savings.
Does anybody have anything to add, or?
Yeah, no, I think that was captured succinctly. And again, typically what we've seen with window replacements is the paybacks tend to be anywhere from 20 to 25 years. So they're a much longer payback period.
Right. Thank you.
Actually, if I may, I'm just jumping there for a second because I'm pleased about that comment. So we really are focused here a lot on energy conservation, saving money on your bill, doing the right thing for the environment, greenhouse gas emission reductions. But let's also talk about tenant comfort, and that window replacement would be a big aspect, triple glaze or whatever you're going to be looking at, leaks, et cetera. But also, I like this term non-energy benefits, and I really enjoy this because an example could be LED, for example, where there's going to be terrific savings on your bill over the years. But what about safety for occupants, parking garage, hallways, corridors? I don't think it can be understated, and you want to consider those non-energy benefits when you're looking at these projects. The savings are great, but it's not just the leader or the sole benefit of the project.
Excellent point.
Right. Thank you. We have a question from Jeanette again. Is there an incentive for replacing fan coil units in condos?
I can take that. Great question, Jeanette. Based on our experience, what we've done with several of the retrofits that we've done for fan coils is there is an incentive available with respect to the motor, the ECM motors that tend to go in with the newer fan coils. So they tend to be a two-stage motor and they're much more efficient. I can tell you that we have, with the engineer's assistance, because in the certain projects that we worked on, the engineer was involved as well. So the engineer was actually tasked by the board to look at this, and there were some good tangible savings associated and some good tangible incentives available that the engineer actually vetted in detail with the board of directors. So to answer your question, yes.
Great, thank you so much. Another question we have here is from Lester. Isn't it better to do a holistic approach rather than just catching the low-hanging fruit with the single track?
Fantastic question. I could not agree with Lester more. Absolutely. The whole premise behind doing an energy audit is to understand the building holistically and to look at all the different areas and avenues that are worth pursuing. And again, it provides the board and the property manager a proper roadmap so they can then have a discussion and consult amongst themselves. what are the areas that they wish to tackle first. Typically, from my standpoint as a board president, I obviously take a look at anything that gives me a payback of less than 2 years, and that intrigues me and my fellow board members a great deal, strictly from an economic standpoint. But again, you want to ensure that you're focusing on the economics of it, but also the comfort of the residents. So it is the best approach is always to look at the building holistically and do, again, a level 2 ASHRAE audit of your building, where we do an in-depth dive and analysis on the water consumption, the hydro consumption, as well as the gas consumption.
Agreed. And I think that an energy audit should be holistic, wherein the approach needs to be as feasible as the finances of the corporation allow. So that will take some
And
time.
I think I might be reading something into your question as well, Bob, that I'm happy to address. So I love the notion of a holistic approach. And even, after the audit's done, it could be that some non-capital measures might really have great payback, right? And would you like to start where you can? And so through the energy performance program, holistic is awesome, less costly for measurement and verification, but it's not a fit for everyone, right? So you have to go in with your eyes open, make sure that's the right thing, that you're able to meet that 5% in the first 2 years, and then continue and maintain those savings over the next 3. But the next part of the question, is it possible to get both, like the performance payment and, say, prescriptive lighting? And it's a great question, and I failed to mention that. I'm glad you brought it up. Because the energy performance program is holistic, no, you are ineligible to participate in retrofit. So you would do that lighting retrofit, you'd do VFDs, you would do anything in that facility over 3 years simply by doing your projects. And at the end of the year, when you create your savings report, all of those savings will come as a result compared to the baseline, and we'll pay you 4 cents a kilowatt hour. Maintain them for the next 2 years, and you get up to 12 cents.
Thank you, Robert. So that answers Bob's question. We have another question from Dean. Is there any incentives on electric vehicle retrofits for new build condos?
I can answer that very quickly from my perspective, and I'm expecting perhaps Emmanuel to maybe add to it. No, I'm afraid we don't have any incentives at this time. I think it's something we should be looking at. It's going to be happening. So now the question is, there's an added load, right? So are there more energy efficient chargers? That's kind of where we'd be looking at.
Right.
So I really don't know at this point, but I suspect there will be other government agencies like the federal government, I'm guessing, and maybe municipal, that might have some incentives.
Well, and
Yeah.
as you touched on, you certainly might be looking to update your whole electrical system in the building to have enough load for the electrical vehicles. Sorry, go ahead, Emmanuel.
No, this is a great question, because it's become a hot topic of discussion lately. And this is where it's actually pretty prudent to engage an electrical engineer to do a study to ensure that the load of the building is capable to handle, let's say, if they want to put 20 charging stations in the garage. So right now, as far as we know, there haven't been any incentives, but I understand, there might be a change in government policy, hopefully in the next year or two, because this has become a very hot topic of discussion recently. It would also make sense to possibly engage an electrical engineer to start doing a load assessment of the building before you start going down that road in detail.
Thank you. We have a question from Salim. What is the approximate cost of a building energy audit for a building that's 75 units in downtown Toronto?
Hi, Salim. Thank you for your question. We are happy as part of the value-added services that we provide. Our energy audits are offered free of charge. We service and maintain many hundreds of condominiums throughout the GTA, so we have a plethora of experience. And we have a dedicated energy audit team specifically focusing on energy audits and all the different measures associated that we find with energy audits. So you can reach out to us directly and engage us, and we'd be happy to come and take a look at it for you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. We have a comment from Darla saying, very informative, and thank you, Fan. And then we have a question from Charles. Are there any incentives for building envelope retrofit, insulation, etc., etc.?
I'm happy to take that one on. Charles, that's a very similar answer I'm going to provide that I did with Bob on the windows, right? Because that's building envelope. And again, for us, your only track is going to be the energy performance program. Same idea, but I would also make sure you check in with Enbridge and see what they have.
Okay, thank you, Robert. We have a question from Salim and a comment from David. So it's all about solar panels. So are solar panel installations for building roofs in Toronto recommended these days to save on electricity costs or to earn revenue by feeding the power grid? If so, how would the board manager go about starting the project scoping planning process? And what about solar panel grants? So I guess we'll just address that entirely on solar panels.
Do you want me to take that one?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, I can just take a little bit of that one. I can tell you that we at the ISO, formerly Ontario Power Authority, we no longer provide incentives for solar panels. It used to be called the FIT or microfit program, where we would provide 80 up to 80 cents at one point per kilowatt hour, selling that electricity back to the grid. So that's no longer available. I think there may be incentives through the Ontario government, not through us, for net metering. So I'd encourage you to look at that, but certainly no direct incentives from the ISO.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that comment. I can tell you 10 years ago, 12 years ago, the incentives were quite lucrative. And that's where you kind of saw an explosion with some buildings within the GTA putting up some solar panels, because from a financial standpoint, it made a great deal of sense. But over the last 7 to 8 years, those incentives have essentially subsided and have gone to the wayside. So we haven't really seen a great deal of interest associated with really any condo or any rental building, for that matter, really keen on installing solar panels on the roof.
Thank you. We have a question from William. Do you recommend low E window films? Does anybody have anything to add there? Or?
Now the big caveat here is that you ensure that they actually stay on. Many buildings put in these temporary plastic coatings, and if the residents take them off, really, you're not seeing much in terms of savings there as well. The best way to find out is to get a test done, often with a smoke pen, to see how much exfiltration you have on that window. And if you find that there's a huge amount of air passing through, in this case, it may be worthwhile. You need to do an energy usage intensity examination of your building first, and then determine what percentage of your building is leaking hot air, and then what you could save then by sealing up the fenestration ratio of your building. Hopefully that answers.
Thank you, Fan. We have a question from David. Is there anyone who services Ottawa? So I guess, I don't know, for the IESO, I'm sure you have somebody out in that region. And for CES, what is your area of coverage?
Well, Dave, it's been a long time. I hope you're keeping well in Ottawa. Currently, right now, we service the Golden Horseshoe area. So we don't go to Ottawa, but feel free to give me a call. We may be looking at that area in the very near future. So feel free to ping me directly on that and we can talk further.
Thank you. We have Jesse. How gas detection systems installation companies can support or participate in energy savings, and which type of approach is preferred? Do you have anyone that can take that, or do we need more clarification, or is that not for this?
Yeah. I guess, do you want to try to answer that, Van?
Well, I guess if you're referring to carbon monoxide detection systems, there isn't a savings amount associated with that as well. Robert, if you want to chime in and see if that incentive is still available. I'm not sure if it's still part of the prescriptive track or not. In the previous iteration of the CFI Energy program, you would get an incentive associated with carbon monoxide detection systems in garages.
I admit that I'm not familiar if they're there or not. So I'd encourage you to look at their website under those tracks that I mentioned earlier.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Pat. Are there incentives to replace individual HVAC units where the unit owner is responsible?
Yeah, I think Pat's referring to the fan coils or the heat pumps within the specific unit. I've seen it on a holistic basis where, there's been several hundred fan coils or heat pumps replaced in buildings where there were incentives available. On an individual basis, we'd have to take a look at that in more detail to understand that, but I'd probably say if there is, it's going to be minimal.
Thank you.
And I might even, and it never hurts to take a look, but I'm going to say fairly confidently that there is not going to be an incentive for the specific unit, because now we're talking about a retail, residential situation, and I think we don't really have a track for that. But you're quite right, Emmanuel. If it's part of an entire project, and then though that equipment, PTAC, and all sorts of that equipment within that facility, because that facility is a commercial property, but not an individual suite.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
agree. I think you'd only really see any sort of savings if it was done, for example, the entire building, when
Yeah.
it would be very hard to measure.
We've never seen it on an individual basis.
Right. Jason asks, what is the Enbridge incentive you said only got notification of today?
Yeah, Jason, you're more than happy to ping me or email me directly. I can forward it to you. We were just notified through email today through our contact at Enbridge, because we work very well and very closely with the folks at Enbridge, because we do about 100 projects a year. So we're tuned into their programs. It's a pretty lucrative program based on the initial view that I had this morning, but happy to send it to you in detail. And we can also post it, if you want, Gail, on the CEI website.
Right.
So folks can actually take a look at it there as well.
Thank you. So we only have a couple of minutes left. I'm going to try to get through as many questions as we can. Charles asks, insulation will reduce cooling and heating costs, so large equipment not running as hard as a baseline. I'm not.
That's more of a statement than a question, but I completely agree. If your pipes aren't insulated already, you could save significant amount by insulating them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jeff asks, we have numerous condo clients with older buildings. If I understand correctly, you can offer a free energy audit to any or all of them to evaluate current performance and suggest equipment replacements and associated incentives.
Yes, absolutely, Jeff. Feel free to reach out to either myself or Fan directly. We'd be happy to assist you there.
Okay, this is more technical question. So it says, thank you, great info here. Is there any incentives to replace PK boilers with RBI boilers?
Yeah, Alban, again, feel free to email me directly. Oftentimes what we take a look at is the level of efficiency. So let's say you're going from a 70% efficient boiler to an 85% efficient boiler to a 95% efficient boiler. There's absolutely incentives associated with that. Again, feel free to reach out to us directly. We'd be able to assist you there.
Thank you. Max, great presentation of dialogue and energy audit is a great starting point. Let me get to the question. Fan mentioned BAS. What tools and technology could potentially play an important role in this?
Great question. So in addition to BAS, you want to make sure that your building runs cleaner and more efficient. By upgrading the efficiency of your equipment, you use less natural gas, and therefore you bring down your emissions.
And I just want to add to what Max just stated here, and Fan kind of alluded that in his presentation. The one big pitfall that we've seen in the condo industry with building automation systems is the whole notion of proprietary versus non-proprietary. I can't emphasize this point enough. You know, if it's proprietary, ask yourself, why do you want to get hooked on that? Because again, you're going to be stuck with that system for a long time, and oftentimes where they nail you and they put the hooks in you is with their annual monitoring fees that they charge that tend to be an exorbitant cost. It's probably one of the best tools to put in your facility, in your building. And again, the caveat is providing that it's non-proprietary. You want to ensure that the equipment is non-proprietary so anybody can monitor that equipment and you're not stuck with it.
Great. And we have one final question
Actually,
here.
Gail, I'd like to jump in just for a sec as well, because part of the question earlier was about greenhouse gas reduction and the trend where we're going now in federal funding, et cetera. And something that we're going to do through the energy performance program, if you go that way, what we're seeing in municipalities, universities, or broader public sector in general, big commercial real estate operations, and perhaps at your facilities now, if you're really driven with greenhouse gas emissions reduction, is if you're going to go from a gas boiler to an electric boiler to reduce your GHG, and you're going to have to really look at that closely, but I can tell you, as I just said earlier, a lot of folks are in those sectors. With the energy performance program, we're not going to ding you for that. That would be what we'd call a non-routine adjustment. Your electricity will go up, your emissions will go down, and we won't penalize you for that.
Great. Thank you, Robert. At this time, unfortunately, we've reached the end of our webinar for today. We would like to thank our title sponsor, the Complete Group of Companies, for making today possible. And we'd like to thank both of the speakers and the other moderator, Emmanuel, for your time. And I hope that everyone got a lot of value out of this webinar. I would just like to mention that the next CAI Canada webinar is scheduled for February 18th at 1 p.m. and it will be titled The Condominium Authority Tribunals Expanding Power. So that should be very interesting as well. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Gail. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.